My name's Luc Dubois, and we're sitting in a room at the Computer Music Center at Columbia University. And this room is the room that houses the RCA Mark II synthesizer, which is the big weird thing behind me. So I'm a staff researcher here. I've been here since 1993, and I specialize in sort of music and multimedia and interactivity. I work as a composer and I work as a sort of video artist and programmer in New York City. I write a lot of software for artist clients, and I teach a lot. I work here, and I teach in a couple of departments at NYU as well. So I started out originally doing sort of live electronic performance on these analog modular synthesizers, these things that look like phone switchboards, and you would just sort of play with them. And I formed a band in college with some friends of mine called the Freight Elevator Quartet that was sort of set up to do live improvised sort of dance music, originally sort of drum and bass. And we had a cellist and a didgeridoo player and a guy with a bunch of drum machines, and I would play these modular synthesizers. And we would just sort of, we would do art galleries and we would do parties and whatever. And the problem with these synthesizers, other than the fact that they're really heavy, is that they're analog, so they're kind of not stable. And we played one show at a club, which shall remain nameless, where depending on whether the light switch was on in the women's room, the synthesizer would drop out of tune. So I would be sort of playing on stage and it would be like, do-do-do-do-do-do-do, and somebody would have to pee and it would go, so I decided that was sort of unacceptable. So I got a laptop and tried to figure out how to sort of do this stuff on a computer. And I'd learned Macs a little bit in college, but I was never really a particularly MIDI-centric person, so I'd never really used it for very much. But when MSP came out, I started sort of playing with it. And at the time, I had just started graduate school here, and I was co-teaching a class on sort of basic electronic music theory. And Thanasis Rakakis, the instructor, and I kind of came up with the idea that maybe we should actually talk about interactivity or interactive music. And so we spent Christmas break of that year sort of giving ourselves crash courses in MSP and figuring it out. And it turned out to be, you know, really useful for me. And from there, since I was writing instrumental music, I started working with incorporating video into it. And so I started working on the Jitter project and stuff as a way to sort of take live musicians, sort of live performers, and kind of amplify their presence or embody them using video. So it's still sort of chamber music, and there's no electronic sounds or anything like that, but the idea is they, you know, sort of a flautist will play and it'll spawn sort of imagery that sort of correlates to it. I always wrote kind of algorithmic music, like sort of using, you know, I'm lazy, basically. Having the computer write music for you is kind of a neat thing. And so I started working with these things called Lindenmayer systems, which are these algorithms, these grammar models. They're actually sort of types of kind of Chomsky grammars that define how things grow. You can use them to define how things like plants grow and how organisms behave. And so and then I would score them for musicians. So this is a guitar piece called Growing Pains. And it's interactive. This is a run of it. This is a recording of it. But the idea is a guitarist plays into my computer, and the computer's detecting the notes. And the notes are commands for something called Turtle Graphics. This little hockey puck thing is drawing. So when I play a C, it'll draw forward. When I play an E flat, it'll turn, right? It's an 18-minute piece, so I won't bore you with it. But if you play it exactly right, at the end, you get a plant, right? So, you know, the score is inferred by this kind of graphical output that I want. But I've always sort of been interested in sort of making an image out of sound and trying to deal with like the fact, especially when you perform, you know, when you perform in sort of modern electronic groups, you know, it's pretty boring. Like my band, right? It's pretty boring to watch. The only person who's remotely dynamic is a cellist because it's a cello and you know how that works. But the rest of the time, it's a bunch of guys sitting behind laptops or behind like esoteric machines, and there's kind of no agency. It doesn't look like we're doing anything. I could just be checking my email, whatever. Could be canned, we have no idea. So it's important to be able to like figure out a way to kind of bring the audience into that process so they feel like they're part of it. And so the nice thing about being able to work with stuff with music these days is you have all these kind of great, you have all these great possibilities for doing stuff like this, which is really exciting. So you can sort of become a new kind of artist just by, working with these silly computers. And you can really change. People can really rethink basic assumptions about what they have to be, and so. You don't really end up. I don't really self-identify myself particularly as a composer anymore. I don't write a lot of string quartets, but I sort of think of myself more as a sort of broader artist, and that's just because I can sort of work with this stuff, so it's fun.